Lebedowicz, or Chris Andersen on Bant Company against Osyp Lebedowicz on green-white tokens. This is your semifinal match for the StarCityGames.com Baltimore Open.
You know, I tried to convince Chris that he should play green-white tokens, and I wonder if he's thinking of my words right now and regretting it.
This might be the convincing, although, I mean, he made it to the top 4 with Bant Company. You can't say that it's not a good showing.
Yeah.
Osyp is on the play here, and he's going to start off with an evolutionary leap. Chris does have 2 lands. He's going to take a point of damage from his Yavimaya to play a Duskwatch Recruiter.
And, you know, casting Evolutionary Leap on turn 2 is a little scary against a Dromoka's Command deck. Tempo does matter, though, and Osyp just wants to get an opportunity to cast all of his spells. He does have 4 Oath of Nisses in his deck, which can play a little bit of guard duty for this Evolutionary Leap and keep it safe against Dromoka's Command. And it's also going to give Osyp a good way to not only find his Avacens, but also flip them. I've been talking about Tragic Arrogance being one of the really powerful 5-mana spells that Osyp has access to. Flipping Avacen is the other really powerful 5-mana spell that is important in the matchup. And these 5-mana spells line up perfectly against what Chris Andersen is doing because 5-mana spells can't be spell-quellered.
All right, well, Osyp does have a Nissa Voice of Zendikar on his 3rd turn. It's going to make a plant token. Chris will attack it with a Duskwatch Recruiter. The plant will jump in front. And Thalia Heretic Cathar has the potential to do a lot of damage here on this board. It's going to make all of the tokens Osyp can generate enter the battlefield tapped and completely shuts off a line of play like Gideon on turn 4 here.
Yeah, this is a pretty big deal having Thalia. You know, when you look at Thalia, you always imagine, wow, it'd be perfect to have her on turn 3. That doesn't always happen, but it's happened here for Chris. And even though Chris is on the draw, this Thalia is letting him essentially play as if he's on the play from this point on, because everything Osyp does is going to essentially be like a turn behind.
All right, well, Osyp is going to make a plant token. It will enter the battlefield tapped. On Chris's turn, he is going to transform his Duskwatch Recruiter into a Kralin Horde Howler and just attack that Nissa to death. He's going to tap 2 mana and play a Nissa Voice of Zendikar. It's going to go get a forest out of his deck and play that as the land for this turn.
And I'm a little curious to see how Osyp plans on using his mana this turn. You know, he doesn't have a card like Secure the Wastes that he could cast end of turn so that he could untap with a bunch of blockers for a Planeswalker. You know, he may, and he chooses not to fire off the plant either, so.
All right, well, he is just going to draw a card, play his 5th land, and pass the turn. He is threatening something like Archangel Avacen here, but that Thalia is going to make it enter the battlefield tapped. This is not looking very good for Osyp.
Well, while it would make the Avacen enter the battlefield tapped, the one thing that Osyp can do, which is pretty nice, is just cast Archangel end of turn, you know, make sure that it's safe against something like Reflector Mage or some other sorcery speed removal like Declaration in Stone, and then Osyp can just untap and then use Evolutionary Leap to sacrifice a creature, and that would flip Avacen during Chris's upkeep and essentially wipe Chris's board.
One way to play around that for Chris, though, is just use a Reflector Mage on that plant. He may see that this is a potential line from Osyp.
Well, he can certainly do that, but Osyp likely has just another random creature that he can play.
Well, here's an Archangel Avacen on Chris's end step. Let's see if he's going to respond at all.
And so the one other thing that Chris can do is he can just have his Thalia, you know, fight or actually the Kralin Horde Howler is still a 3/3, so you can actually have the Howler.
Oh, he's going to make Osyp sacrifice his enchantment and fight off the plant token with a Dromoka's Command in response to the Archangel Avacen.
So this is a nice play. It still leaves him open to a potential creature plus Dromoka's Command or a Hangerback Walker for 0, and it still leaves this Avacen in play, which is a little bit of a problem. Chris does have a Reflector Mage that will help, but the merits of having one of Chris's other creatures just fight the Avacen would be that it, you know, Chris would be 2-for-1ing himself, but he would be able to keep that Avacen off the board.
All right, well, Nissa Vastwood Seer is going to resolve. He's going to plus it and make a plant. It will enter the battlefield tapped, though, because of that Thalia Heretic Cathar.
And now if Osyp has a Jermoka's command, it might be a little bit of a disaster for Chris.
Osyp does have to keep in mind that with the 2 mana that Chris has available, he can cast Spell Queller because of that Kralin Horde Howler.
Yeah, that's most certainly true, but Osyp is kind of on the back foot. He needs to do something to catch up, and he kind of just needs to go for it.
All right, so it looks like he's going to put a counter on his Avacyn and have the plant fight the Thalia.
And this is part of the reason why I would have liked to have seen Chris just 2-for-1 himself to make sure that the Avacyn dies, because this green-white tokens deck, it's so good at flipping Avacyn. If it gets it in play, it's going to find a way to flip it. There's also a lot of merits to Chris's line of play, though, and that should not be understated. He was able to do, a lot of damage. He was able to get rid of the evolutionary leap, and those are all good things also.
Right, the Archangel Avacyn is going to flip. It will kill all of Chris's creatures and deal 3 damage to him, knocking him down to 10.
And this Reflector Mage is a little awkward because Avacyn the Purifier is not the same card as, or does not have the same name as Archangel Avacyn. So even though this Avacyn gets bounced, Osyp can actually just redeploy it as soon as he wants.
All right, Nissa is going to +1 and make an 0-1 plant. And Osyp will pass the turn back to Chris Andersen.
And this is so common, or I should say, this is exactly how the matchup usually plays out for me, where the Bant player will get some damage in early. There's, it's a little scary between turns 5, 6, and 7, but then once I've wiped the board once, a lot of the wind is taken out of the Bant Company's sails, and the green-white tokens deck, it just has more powerful cards. If things start to get bad, they can always wipe the board again later, and eventually they're able to just start killing the Bant Company player in the air while the Planeswalkers keep generating more and more value.
Well, Chris is just going to pass the turn, and Osyp will flash in an Archangel Avacyn on his end step. He does have a copy of Oath of Nissa on his main phase. He has a few options there. It looks like there's a Gideon ally of Zendikar, maybe a Hangerback Walker. Both of those are going to be very good options. And Osyp has played this game extremely well to put himself in this position to try and close the game out over the next few turns.
Yeah, I really like playing the Gideon. The main thing that he'd worry about is it getting spell quellered, but that's a lot better than having a Hangerback Walker getting spell quellered. Hangerback Walker is probably one of the best targets for spell queller out of the Bant Company deck, because even if their spell queller dies, the Osyp will just get a Hangerback Walker cast for 0. And when X equals 0, that Hangerback Walker is likely to just go straight to the graveyard. There's some scenarios where Osyp may want that if he's looking to flip an Avacyn, but generally speaking, that's not going to be the case.
It looks like he is going to get that Hangerback Walker. Maybe not.
So the merits of taking the Gideon, in addition to the spell queller component, are Gideon allows Osyp to be more proactive on the board, and if it sits around, it's going to generate a lot of value. The Hangerback Walker is better if things go awry. If Chris is able to hit a Collected Company and get a bunch of stuff going on the board, Osyp may need to wipe the board again, and Hangerback Walker would be able to do that. I like his decision here to take the Gideon and be more proactive, because right now he's not behind on the board, and this is a board state where Gideon can generate a lot of value.
Well, he is going to take Gideon. He's going to minus it to just make an emblem.
And I like this a lot. The emblem has a lot of repercussions that are not always apparently obvious. The fact that your plant tokens have a 1 power rather than 0 power when they're made is a pretty big deal. Also, it means that Osyp's Avacyn can attack through Chris's Avacyn, and Osyp's Sylvan Advocates can attack through Chris's Sylvan Advocates. All of these things are pretty important, quite frankly, and the emblem enables them.
Well, that emblem is going to pump Osyp's team. He's going to minus his Nissa to put a counter on everything, attack Chris for 6 and put him at 4. Chris will play a Tireless Tracker, get a clue, and draw a card, but in the face of the massive board of Osyp Lebedowicz, Chris is going to scoop it up, and Osyp will move on to take this first game in the green-white tokens versus Bant Company matchup. Let's take a look at the player sideboard so we can see exactly how things are going to change up here. On Osyp's side, we have 2 Tireless Tracker, 2 Stasis Snare, 1 Clip Wings, 1 Aerial Volley, 2 Lambholt Pacifist, 2 Declaration in Stone, 2 Linvala the Preserver, 2 Nissa Vastwood Seer, and 1 Quarantine Field. How do we think Osyp's going to sideboard?
So the cards that I like out of Osyp's deck are the Aerial Volley. It's just a great 1-mana answer to Spell Queller, and then Linvala the Preservers and Nissa Vastwood Seers. I don't think I would bring anything else. Osyp's deck, because he has the Tragic Arrogance's main deck, he's pretty well set up to beat them, and he just wants the Linvala for just a little extra top end. It's really good against Spell Queller and Reflector Mage, and it's just going to make it really hard for Chris to actually kill Osyp.
Now on Chris's side, we have 2 Declaration in Stone, 1 Tireless Tracker, 3 Lambholt Pacifist, 1 Nissa Vastwood Seer, 3 Tragic Arrogance, 2 Ojutai's Command, 2 Negate, and 1 Tamiyo Field Researcher. How do we think Chris is going to sideboard?
So I know a lot of Bant players are tempted to try to play a more mid-rangey game against the green-white tokens deck. I think they are just outclassed in that manner. So I think what Chris wants to do is just have a lot of pressure and then have either Ojutai's Command or Negate to counter Osyp's Avacyn's and Tragic Arrogances so that Osyp can't catch back up once he falls behind. Some people like Declaration of Stone against the token strategy. I don't even think it's that good. Some people like Lambholt Pacifist when they want to be aggressive. I don't really like that either. So we'll see exactly what Chris does. There are a variety of ways you can approach this matchup. The thing that I like the best is just Ojutai's Command and Negate, but he may do some other things, and we'll see how those play out.
All right, well, that is all perfectly reasonable, especially coming from Andrew Boswell, who is the green-white tokens master. And for those of you who want to master your given standard deck, you can do that by playing in SCG Game Night. So if you're interested in having more tournaments during the week or whenever at your local game store, let them know to get a hold of us so they can get that set up for you. Currently, for every week in July, you can get Snipcaster Mage, exclusive pens, and tokens, but that is about to change once we move into August, where you can get Young Burrowmancer. Again, exclusive pins and tokens in August. And in September, we have an even cooler Doge, the Bone Chewer Giant. Exclusive pins and tokens. Go.starcitygames.com/game night to learn more. Make sure you let your local game store know that you would like to have these events available, and they can contact us to get signed up.
Yeah, and I've played this matchup so many times, and it's funny how it so frequently comes down to just a turn 5 sweeper. As soon as I learned that, just having a bunch of 5-mana sweepers and the Tragic Arrogances to increase that redundancy just made so much. Linvala the Preserver, though, is the other thing that is essentially the icing on the cake for this matchup, because it's just so, not only is it so hard for the Bant Company deck to deal with, it's hard for them to kill with Dromoka's Command. They can't deal with it cleanly with Declaration in Stone because there's 2 tokens, but and Reflector Mage also doesn't do very much good work against it. And despite the green-white deck being a token strategy, when it's losing and it really needs Linvala to pull a lot of weight, the Bant Company deck usually has more creatures. So a lot of the times when you cast Linvala, it's for full value almost every time. And it's so hard for the Bant deck to push through, and then as soon as you're ready to start attacking, Linvala is just bigger than everything in the air. As compared to the Bant Company can do. The other thing that's nice about it is you play Linvala, and if you get an emblem or a Nissa minus, it's just a 2-turn clock, even if your opponent's at 20.
All right, well, both players are going to keep their opening 7. Chris Andersen on Bant Company against Osyp Lebedowicz on green-white tokens. Chris is going to start off with an Evolving Wilds and sacrifice it on Osyp's end step. Osyp's going to play an Oath of Nissa. Looks like we're just going to find that 1 copy of Westvale Abbey.
And for those of you who don't know, Oath of Nissa might actually be the best card in this green-white token strategy. The Oath of Nissa, it just gives the deck so much consistency. We've talked time and time again about how the easiest way to lose in standards is just fall behind on your land drops. Oath of Nissa helps make sure that never happens. Also, Oath of Nissa allows you to have fewer permanents to play on turns 2, 3, and 4 and see them with greater frequency. So it really is just the card that lets you just consistently curve a 2-drop into a 5-drop, which is something that normally you just cannot reliably do.
All right, well, Chris Andersen does not have a turn 2 play, then Osyp is going to play a Sylvan Advocate on 2, but Chris has a Reflector Mage to bounce that back to his hand. And as we go into Osyp's turn 3, let's see if he has a Planeswalker.
And the mana in this deck isn't quite perfect, and it looks like Osyp unfortunately is not able to play another untapped mana source. But even if you were to play something like a basic Plains, or even another Westphal Abbey, that Oath of Nissa would allow him to cast a Nissa Vastwood Seer. Again, Oath of Nissa just does so much for the consistency of this deck.
Osyp does have a Canopy Vista tapped. Chris Andersen is going to play his 4th land and crash in with a Reflector Mage. On Osyp's 4th turn, he's going to start off with a Sylvan Advocate. Chris will cast Collected Company in response. Let's see if we can find a Spell Queller or some way to interact.
So one of the cards that Chris has access to that I think is pretty important is actually Selfless Spirit. It's a flying attacker, so it's good at hitting planeswalkers. The other thing that's really nice about it is it helps keep Osyp or Chris's board safe against an Avacyn flip.
All right, well, it looks like Chris is going to get a Duskwatch Recruiter and a Sylvan Advocate off of that Collected Company. So Osyp's Sylvan Advocate is going to resolve. A Fortified Village will enter the battlefield, and Osyp's going to reveal a basic land, basic plains.
And I think Osyp is planning on playing a Dramoka's Command, and I think he wants to do it now instead of next turn. If he does it now, the fight will put some damage on that Sylvan Advocate, and then it will clear before Chris's combat step, so that this Sylvan Advocate will be able to do be a much more potent blocker on Chris's turn.
Well, Osyp is going to put a counter on his Advocate and fight off Chris's Advocate. We also have an update that Zach Plott is up a game in his Bant Company mirror match.
Go Plott.
Shout out to Eldrazi Displacer.
Yeah, shout out to Nick and Sean Plott, Day 9 and Tasteless, as I'm sure a lot of my nerds at home know. They're great guys.
Well, Chris is going to activate Duskwatch Recruiter on his turn. He's going to find a Tireless Tracker. Just going to pass the turn and flip that Duskwatch Recruiter into a Krowlin Horde Howler on Osyp's upkeep.
And this is pretty relevant because it means that Chris has this Spell Queller that he can cast for just 2 mana. But Osyp's kind of fine just, doing nothing and making land drops. That benefits Osyp
Looks like he's just
a lot more than it does
Chris.
Chris.
Going to pass the turn.
And I'm not sure, but I think Osyp might have Linvala in hand. So he's probably just waiting for Chris to play another card or a Reflector Mage so that he can get full value off that Linvala with his 6 land drop.
All right, well, there is a Tireless Tracker for Chris. He will play a Forest afterwards to bring along a clue with it.
And so Chris is trying to play this in a way where he's holding up his Negate and his Spell Queller so his board doesn't get wiped. But this is the tricky thing that the green-white tokens deck can do, and why it puts Bant Company in such a problematic scenario is because the green-white tokens deck, it has powerful spells in the form of spells as well as creatures. So there's Avacyn, there's Linvala, there's Tragic Arrogance, and Chris has a very hard time having the right answer for all situations. All of his answers are situational.
Well, here we have Linvala the Preserver is going to come down for Osyp Lebedowicz. He is behind in creatures and in life, so he's going to gain 5 up to 23, get a 3/3 flying token. That is full-blown value.
Yeah, and this Linvala can just end the game. Chris really needs to see something like an Avacyn real fast, or a land and a Dramoka's Command. It looks like he does have a Tragic Arrogance, which is pretty nice, but it's not that great because each board is kind of at parity, and the best thing that Chris can do is cast Tragic Arrogance, keep his Tireless Tracker, have Osyp keep his 3/3 Angel, but this is this is not a blowout Tragic Arrogance. This is kind of I'm going to make the board so I'm a little ahead rather than a total blowout, catch up and be ahead.
Yeah, so Tragic Arrogance is going to trade off the board's leaving Osyp with the 3-3 and Chris Andersen with a tireless tracker that has a counter on it and another clue on the battlefield.
So I'd mentioned how I would like to see Chris be or fully commit to the role of the aggressor in this matchup. It looks like he's decided that he wants to play a bit more mid-rangey in this matchup, and I'm informed by that because of that Tragic Arrogance. That is just a full-on mid-range card.
All right, well, Osyp is going to try and use a Declaration in Stone on the tireless tracker for Chris Andersen. He will counter it with the negate. Osyp just has a land and an attack with the Angel. And here Chris has a second copy of Tireless Tracker. That's going to give him 2 clues.
Yeah, and generally speaking, the green-white tokens deck is favored in the end game. But in this particular situation, Chris has now 2 tireless trackers to generate a lot of card advantage, and Osyp needs something pretty powerful soon. Otherwise, he can find himself in a situation where we're entering the end game and he's just not favored.
Well, Chris is going to go ahead and attack with that Tireless Tracker, cash in one of his clues, and grow it to a 5-power creature. That will knock Osyp down to 14, where he does still have that 3-3 Angel, and it looks like he picked up a copy of Archangel Avacyn.
Yeah, the Avacyn will be nice, although Chris's creatures are going to be big enough where if Chris has access to a Dromoka's command, he's just going to be able to fight the Avacyn, all the while he's going to be drawing tons of cards. And this is one of the things that is fairly interesting about this matchup is usually the green-white tokens plays the control role, and usually the bank company plays the aggressive role, but the games do play out in different ways, and it's one of the things that makes it so hard to figure out the matchup is because sometimes the roles do reverse.
Well, Chris is going to cash in a clue on Osyp's end step, grow both of those Tireless Trackers, and here he has a copy of Evolving Wilds. That's going to give him 4 clues with these 2 Tireless Trackers. This card is pretty good.
Well, yeah, when it lives, Tireless Tracker, it can run away with the game.
I mean, that's the hallmark of a good green card advantage card, though, right?
Yeah.
If it lives, it will run away with the game.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what Chris decides to do here on his turn. Looks like he's just going to send both of his Tireless Trackers into the red zone. Osyp has an Archangel Avacyn. Chris is okay with it resolving.
So now that they're indestructible, Osyp can double block and at least kill one of them. He'll take a fair bit of damage, but he's going to be in okay shape, and he'll be able to, you won't really be able to race too well, but...
This is interesting that Chris let the indestructible resolve, since he did have the mana to basically draw 3 cards to try and find a Dromoka's command.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, we're sacrificing a clue.
And it'll be interesting to see how much damage Chris ends up pushing through. If he cracks, let's see, so that thing's a 6-power creature. So if he cracks 1 more clue, he'll push 7 damage and have a 7-power Tireless Tracker. And that will make it so that the single Tireless Tracker is a lethal threat on the following turn and will need to be blocked indefinitely. So if Osyp can find something like Anissa to do that, that'll be great. But if he doesn't, he's going to have a hard time dealing with it. He does have the Westvale Abbey, which can do it a little bit.
Well, these are some large Tireless Trackers, as one is 10 power and one is 9 power. Osyp's just going to draw a card for his turn and scoop it up. That was a lot of clues. Chris Andersen had his Sherlock hat on,
yeah,
and was able to push a bunch of damage there as Osyp stumbled, unfortunately, and Chris Andersen is going to even this matchup 1-1 in the Band Company versus Green-White Tokens match. Do we think there's going to be any sideboard changing depending if they're on the play or on the draw?
I think their decks will essentially stay the same. I think usually they're going to assume that whatever the good cards in the matchup are the cards that they're going to play, and play draw may change their win ratio, but not how they actually play.
Yeah. All right, well, while our players shuffle up here for the last match, let's go ahead and take a look at the SCG Tour schedule. So we are currently here in Baltimore, and there's not too many open weekends remaining in this season. So Andy and I were in Worcester a couple weekends back, commentating the Legacy Open. We were in Columbus,
I was in Columbus.
July 23rd and 24th for the Eldritch Moon Release Standard Open, where Devin Kepke took that down with Bant Company. We're here in Baltimore. Next week will be the SCG Regional Championships alongside the Pro Tour. The following weekend is the SCG Open in Syracuse, which is modern. And then the following weekend after that will be the New Jersey Invitational Weekend. We're going to play split modern and standard. 3 players will punch their tickets into the Players' Championship at the end of the year, as will the winner.
You know, and one thing to highlight about that last matchup is we saw that the tireless trackers just ended up generating a ton of value. And that is what Chris needs if he wants to win mid-range long game. That said, he only has access to 3 tireless trackers and 3 Duskwatch recruiters to generate a lot of value in a long game, whereas Osyp has access to potentially 10 planeswalkers, which have a similar role. So Osyp has higher redundancy on mid-range card advantage cards, but in that particular game we saw that he didn't actually see any of them. So I think that's one of the reasons why Chris was able to gain an advantage in that mid-late game scenario.
We are heading here into Game 3. I just got word that Zach Plott has won his match 2-0 on the back of his Eldrazi Displacer and a bucket load of mulligans for his opponent.
Oh, wow.
We're going into Game 3 here. Osyp Lebedowicz on green-white tokens against Chris Andersen on Bant Company. Osyp is on the play. Let's see if he can control the tempo of this game, as you usually want to try to do when you're on the play. Chris did mulligan to 6. He's going to scry and keep it on top.
And one of the defining things that Osyp really wants is a planeswalker on these early turns. He needs some sort of good source of card advantage.
Well, he does have a Hangerback Walker on 2 with a couple of forests. Looks like Chris just picked up a copy of Declaration in Stone, but he will deploy Sylvan Advocate.
And I like this. Chris wants to get some pressure on the board before he starts answering things. That Hangerback Walker isn't going to do anything serious now, so you might as well just get your threat on the table while you can.
All right, Osyp has a 3rd Forest and a Sylvan Advocate, and is just going to pass the turn back to Chris.
And the fact that Osyp doesn't have any white mana is not a good sign. He does have a lot of green spells in his deck, so he should be able to play some magic, and with an Oath of Nissa, he'll even be able to cast Gideon, but he most certainly needs to draw some white mana soon. Getting this Clue token, though, is kind of nice because he needs some redraws. So, his Hangerback Walker's not doing a whole lot at this stage. Drawing a random card off the top of his deck might actually help him out.
Declaration in Stone is going to take care of that Hangerback Walker. It will give Osyp a clue. He'll draw for his turn. Let's see if he can find a white source or some kind of planeswalker to put into play.
I think he might have a Nissa Vastwood Seer, which isn't one of his best planeswalkers. I think this turn I would have liked to play the Nissa Vastwood Seer instead of cracking the clue just to guarantee another land drop. Seems like he's choosing not to, or I'm just not seeing that card clearly in his hand, one or the other.
All right, so he did just crack that clue and is going to pass without a 4th land. Chris Andersen does have a 4th land and a Collected Company. He's looking for a Reflector Mage or some way to push the damage here. Ooh, and a Reflector Mage and a Sylvan Advocate is a pretty big game. If he's able to get to 6 lands, those Advocates will grow very large.
Yeah, and Osyp has found a white mana, which is quite nice, and is able to get a nice tempo boost by getting killing 2 of Chris's cards, but he still needs to get a little more going.
All right, Declaration in Stone is going to take care of those 2 Sylvan Advocates for Osyp Lebedowicz, and then he's just going to play out an Evolutionary Leap. Chris does get 2 Clue tokens that he can use to redraw here when he has mana available. On his turn, he's going to attack for 2 with Reflector Mage. It's going to knock Osyp down to 16. He's just going to play out a Duskwatch Recruiter and a Selfless Spirit and pass the turn.
And the Selfless Spirit is a pretty big deal because it means that if Osyp were to just, let's say, play a hit a plains, play a Hangerback Walker, or excuse me, play an Avacyn, and then Hangerback Walker for 0, all it would do is kill that Selfless Spirit because the Selfless Spirit would be able to protect the other creatures. That's pretty important. It also means that if Osyp were to play a Nissa, Voice of Zendikar or a Gideon, Selfless Spirit would be something that could actually attack it in the air.
Osyp is going to cast a Nissa Vastwood Seer and go find a forest out of his deck. He will use that as his land drop for the turn. And now he's able to redeploy that Sylvan Advocate that was bounced earlier, if he so desires.
Yeah, I would actually kind of like to see a fight with the Selfless Spirit and a +1/+1 counter on the Nissa, because that would mean that Chris would not be able to push through any damage without deploying another Reflector Mage on that Nissa, and replaying the Nissa at a later date is kind of nice.
All right, well, Chris is just going to attack with a Selfless Spirit after Osyp deployed that Sylvan Advocate. Osyp will fall down to 14, and Chris is just going to pass the turn back with 4 mana available. He has both Ojutai's Command and Collected Company. Osyp is just going to pass the turn back on his turn, and here we have a Collected Company for Chris that will resolve. And he's going to find just a Reflector Mage.
Just a Reflector Mage is still pretty good. And here I would really like to see Osyp +1/+1 the Nissa, fight the Selfless Spirit, so at least he has a chance to hold back these 2 Reflector Mages.
Reflector Mage is going to target Sylvan Advocate, and Osyp will respond. He's going to fight the Sylvan Advocate onto the Selfless Spirit and put a +1/+1 counter on the Nissa.
And now if Osyp can find another white source so that he can, land one of these Tragic Arrogances, he's going to do a good job of having caught back up, and then with another land drop, he'll be able to flip his Nissa, which would be quite nice. Chris is, still packing a bit of gas, though, and he's got these 2 clues, so Chris's aggression is not going to end anytime soon. He's going to be able to redeploy threats onto the board.
All right, Osyp is going to sacrifice the Sylvan Advocate to the Evolutionary Leap.
Oh, and you would love to draw those lands.
Right.
A redundant Nissa is not particularly helpful.
He will get another copy of Nissa Vastwood Seer, pass the turn back to Chris Andersen.
And it looks like Chris has a Tragic Arrogance in his hand, and you can see that it generally doesn't jive particularly well with the overall Bant Company plan, but it is a good card to just save you out of sticky scenarios that you wouldn't otherwise have an out for.
All right, Chris is going to attack with his Kralin Horde Howler. Osyp will trade off his 3/3 Nissa, especially since he has another one in hand. But Chris has an Ojutai's Command just waiting here. So this is going to counter the Nissa and put Selfless Spirit back onto the battlefield.
Yeah, a very big deal. And Osyp is really having a hard time here. He has a lot of the cards that he needs, but he just does not have the lands. He also doesn't have a Planeswalker to really generate any significant value. These Declaration of Stones are nice because they're making sure that Osyp doesn't die, but Chris has 4 clues.
Yeah, he does have a lot of clues. He's been constricted on mana, and if he ever gets to the point where he starts to flood out, he might have something to do with it.
Right. Osyp just has so much that he needs to slog through. That said, he can get rid of a lot of those clues with Tragic Arrogance. If Osyp can find a scenario where Chris is tapped out on Chris's turn and cast Tragic Arrogance, he may be able to kill a bunch of those clues as well as a bunch of Chris's other stuff.
All right, so Osyp does find another white source. He is just going to play a Sylvan Advocate. Chris is going to Collected Company in response, find a Sylvan Advocate and a Selfless Spirit. And here we go. On his combat step, he's going to attack for 4 with those Selfless Spirits.
And Osyp probably is forced to fire off a Tragic Arrogance on this upcoming turn. I don't think he wants to take more damage from those Selfless Spirits, and he probably wants to try to get rid of these clues.
He's just going to pass the turn back to Osyp. Osyp will attack for 4 with his Sylvan Advocate. That's going to bring Chris Andersen down to 15. He finds another land, and there is a Tragic Arrogance. Chris can sacrifice a clue and maybe have a chance at a negate.
That would be quite the top deck. Can he get here? Instead, he gets a Thalia, which is also pretty nice.
Thalia and a Spell Queller are the 2 draws. He's going to leave him with a clue and a Sylvan Advocate.
And this is most certainly the, unfortunately the best case scenario for Osyp. Chris used his mana drawing cards instead of deploying to the board, so Osyp is safe for now, and he's got some Tragic Arrogances that can do some good work on these upcoming turns, but...
Well, Chris is not drawing lands, but he has drawn another Collected Company.
And even if Chris hits a Reflector Mage here, it'll mean that Osyp only gets attacked for 2. But this is a little scary because it...
Well, Reflector Mage is going to come down along with a Thalia Heretic Cathar. That Thalia has the potential to push this game in Chris's favor a little bit further, as Osyp is going to be hard-pressed to find defenders now.
Yeah, what's also tricky about this is Tragic Arrogance because it leaves each player with 1 creature. You really want to cast it when you have a creature in play. And if Osyp is casting Tragic Arrogance on an empty board, it's a lot worse. So this is perfect because this means that he'll be able to redeploy a Sylvan Advocate and Tragic Arrogance on Osyp's turn.
All right, so Sylvan Advocate is going to come across for 2 damage. It's going to knock Osyp down to 6 and pass the turn back.
So this next Tragic Arrogance will be a nice little 2-for-1. It'll be able to kill the Sylvan Advocate and the Thalia. Not a total blowout or anything like that, but certainly a respectable play.
He's just going to play Plains and pass.
Chose not to play the Sylvan Advocate, which is an interesting play. And despite being stuck on 4 lands, Chris has been able to just constantly apply pressure.
Well, Reflector Mage is going to come in for 2 and knock Osyp down to 4. Thalia Heretic Cathar is going to come down. Osyp will use another Tragic Arrogance, and now he plays the Sylvan Advocate. I wonder if he thought that he couldn't play the Advocate because it was targeted by Reflector Mage.
Maybe. Looks like Chris has picked up a negate, but I think Osyp has cast all 3 of his Tragic Arrogances. Osyp really needs something like a Linvala. That would be probably one of the best things he could do. He might even be tempted to just end of turn use Evolutionary Leap to sacrifice his Sylvan Advocate, just so that he can dig to something like an Avacyn or Linvala, or even like a big Hanger Backwalker being sacrificed to make a bunch of tokens could be valuable too.
Well, Chris is going to play Sylvan Advocate of his own and pass the turn back. Osyp will draw his card for the turn. Looks like it might just be another land.
Yeah, I would almost like to see Osyp attack, get 4 damage in, and then just sacrifice his Sylvan Advocate to the Evolutionary Leap. If he finds a Linvala, he would go back up to 9 life, and you would get an Angel token to go with it. If he finds an Avacyn, that can prove to be quite useful also. If he finds a Hanger Backwalker, that would be good. And if he just finds another Sylvan Advocate, well, he's kind of in the exact same place he is now. So. And so far in this game 2 and this game 3, Osyp just hasn't been able to get any really good sources of card advantage online. So he's been able to answer much of Chris's board, but Osyp has just kind of, run out of gas.
Right, Osyp is going to attack Chris down to 11 with that Sylvan Advocate. An Evolutionary Leap is going to happen, and that's going to find an Archangel Avacyn.
An Avacyn is, pretty nice with the Evolutionary Leap in play. It's not going to be too hard for him to flip it.
Chris is going to draw a card on Osyp's end step with the clue.
And Lumbering Falls is a pretty nice draw to have. That can be a pretty decent attacker. It dodges Tragic Arrogance and Avacyn flipping. And generally is just something that's pretty hard to deal with.
Now Chris is in a position here where he can just attack with his creatures, get in 2 points of damage to knock Osyp down to 2, and then just deploy more creatures and put Osyp to the test of having an answer.
Yeah.
Looks like he's not going to. He's just going to pass the turn, allow the Avacyn to enter the battlefield. Let's see what Osyp can find here. There's an Oath of
this
Nissa.
is great. And I think I would have tried to counter that
Yeah.
if I were Chris.
He did have a Spell Queller. Oh, and that's going to find a Linvala.
And this is huge. So he won't get the token. He will get the 5 life, though, which is certainly the more important part. And now Chris is looking at this Tragic Arrogance in his hand. And if he casts Tragic Arrogance, whether he leaves Osyp with the Linvala or the Avacyn, he's still in bad shape. And Osyp can just sacrifice the one of them to Evolutionary Leap beforehand so that he can redraw a card and pick and choose which one stays in play. So this is a pretty tight scenario, and we'll see if Chris gets punished for not using his mana a little more proactively.
So Archangel Avacyn is going to attack Chris.
And this is kind of bad news for Chris. There's not a whole lot he can do to get out of this.
Spell Queller is going to come down, and we're looking at a block.
Well, Chris has a lot of cards in hand. So now that we're at this spot, I kind of like this because Chris doesn't want it to be too close of a race. He has extra cards to burn. He doesn't have any other good way to use his mana. And this means that when Osyp casts Linvala and gets the token, Chris can cast Tragic Arrogance and make it so that Osyp is only potentially able to keep the Angel token, but Evolutionary Leap will provide a little bit of counterplay towards that.
So Osyp is going to leap away the token, and that's going to trigger the transform on Archangel Avacyn in Chris's upkeep.
Yeah, and this is going to wipe Chris's board, unfortunately. And this is navigated quite well by Osyp. He didn't have, he was missing white mana for so much of this game. He didn't have a Planeswalker to generate a lot of value and gum up the board. He had his 3 Tragic Arrogances, which I do think is one of the best cards in the matchup, and having it is one of the reasons that you're favored against Bant Company. And now that we're at this stage where Osyp is casting these big angels and he has access to Evolutionary Leap, it's pretty hard for Chris to hang. So now Chris is probably going to try to figure out if there's anything that he can do.
Avacyn is going to transform, deal 3 damage to Chris, and knock him down to 4.
Yeah, and now even the Tragic Arrogance won't save Chris, which is pretty unfortunate. If he can, hit an amazing collected company, maybe he can live for a turn, but it's going to be an uphill battle from here. I think Osyp Lebedowicz with his dual-wielding angels is just leaning, way too hard on Chris. I think Chris is pretty close to just breaking under the pressure. Osyp, it's going to take this game.
Chris Andersen is going to extend the hand. Osyp Lebedowicz is going to win this match 2-1 and move on to our finals for Star City Games Baltimore. He's going to be meeting Zach Plott, where we're going to have green-white tokens versus Bant Company in the finals.